Hello and welcome to High Point Music's Gear Reviews. I'm Lewis, and in today's episode I'm going to be showing you one of the most iconic distortion sounds from the 70s or late 70s, 80s, 90s, right through to modern music, from the ProCo Rat. The ProCo Rat was built in Kalamazoo in Michigan. Some of you may be familiar with that city name because that's where Gibson originally started. They've developed this pedal in 1978. It's very similar to the Boss DS1 in circuit style. There are some definite changes internally. Uses a different chip and a couple of other bits and pieces that help to give it its signature sound. But it has been there from the start and it has been very, very popular. Used by people like Jeff Beck, Kurt Cobain, the guys from Blur. It's been used a lot, so it'd be a great pedal to check out, particularly if you're into your grunge, rock, harder blues, that kind of sound. So let's give it a spin and see what it sounds like. Today I'm playing my Fender Stratocaster, which sounds like this. I've got everything set pretty mildly. We've got our distortion control here, we've got our filter control and our volume control. These will be fairly similar controls to what you've seen on other distortion pedals on our channel. The big difference is this filter control. It actually cuts treble rather than cutting a little bit of bass and then a little bit of treble like say the DS1 does. So when it's turned all the way down, there is no filtering. And as you turn that knob up, the filtering increases, slowly reducing treble. So it kind of does this. So you can hear it does take a nice amount of treble off the top, and it's usually the sort of thing where you would dial your distortion up first and then slowly turn that up until you hear that reduction in brightness or sharpness that you may be experiencing. Otherwise, I think it sounds pretty good left open, so if you want to get the most iconic Rat sound, you kind of want that treble response. So let's spend some time going through the gain controls. I've got it set there pretty medium gain, very good for crunchy kind of sound. But it does do a lot of other stuff. So if we turn our distortion all the way down and our filters all the way off, what we are left with is at the point at which it makes gain. You can hear about that 9 o'clock. Does a pretty nice overdrive sound. There's just that little bit of crispiness going on. It's not super amp-like at this point. The crispiness is, I don't know, I think maybe you would consider it fairly unique for the Rat. But it just does give that nice kind of overdriven sound. You do have to get the volume pretty high, so as we turn our gain up, you'll notice that drops right back. So let's push it up a little bit. So the gain is definitely higher now, even though we've only kind of gone from that 8:30 to the 9 o'clock position. But as you back your volume off on your guitar, you get a pretty nice response. Backing your volume off like that does allow this to be a bit more of an EQ kind of style change of sound. You're not necessarily getting a lot of distortion, but it kind of changes the character. It's a cool way to get an alternative clean tone just by knowing how to dial that gain control in. So back at our full volume, you can hear now it's more of an overdrive. It's still nice and bright, which I quite like about this particular pedal, but it does have that more aggressive kind of sound when you strum a little bit harder. So a little bit of lead work at this setting. Sounds pretty good. Let's push our distortion up a little bit higher and bring our volume down. I might turn that back up in a second. Let's see how it is at about that 11 o'clock position. So it definitely has that great crunchy like guitar tone. You're going to get a similar kind of sound using a stacked set of pedals for this much gain. So having that range from that 8:30 to 11 o'clock is a pretty good one to have in a pedal. Has that great neck pickup lead tone that I like. So it works pretty nicely. I'm going to just dial this filter control around so you can hear what it sounds like at the higher gain. So you can hear it does cut a lot of that sharpness out of the top end when you're at the higher gains, but it definitely will be more effective the higher that gain goes, at least to my ears. So let's push that distortion up. Let's get it up to that 2 o'clock position. So at the higher gain settings, the first thing I'm noticing is how much more bottom end there is in that signal and how much quicker it is taking for that to tighten up. You've got to be a lot harder with your right hand. And using your left hand a little bit does help. Let's push that filter back up to 12. So it definitely gets that little response a little nicer having the filter dialed in. Part of the sound of the Rat pedal is that brightness and harshness though. So if you're using a sound that you really want it to be really aggressive and bold, you probably don't need to worry too much about having that filter dialed in much past here. It definitely does shape the character quite well. Let's push our gain control all the way up and give it a blast there. I'm going to leave that filter off as well. Pull our volume back and just see how well that dials down. So definitely gets a lot fuzzier in its response towards that top end. I did like the way that when I roll my guitar volume down, you lose a little bit of that bottom end response and the overdrive or the distortion really tightens up. I think that's a great feature to have on something that has such a great sound at both the top and the lower end of the gain. Just gives you that more dynamic range and makes this a more versatile pedal. So that's the ProCo Rat. It's got a pretty huge range of gain available. That low gain range you can use for a clean tones, you can use it for a clean boost, a bit of an EQ change if you just want to go to something alternative. Those medium ranges are definitely great overdriven sounds. Because they palm mute so tightly and it's such a bright response, it really does sound like a great amp going into overdrive to my ears. It's not the perfect amp recreation, you know, it's not an amp in a box pedal, but it does produce a really nice overdrive. Then we go from our overdrives into the higher gains where you can get that really fuzzed out, really saturated sound. And just by working the volume pot on your guitar or backing that distortion off a little bit, you're going to find that balance where you get the palm muting really tightly, but you can hit it really hard and get those bigger dynamic changes in your playing as well. So it's a great pedal for rhythm work, it's a great pedal for lead work. Even if you're just playing like alternative, pop, that kind of thing, those EQ changes and those mild overdrives have been a staple for a long time, and there's going to be certainly room for it in your guitar arsenal if you think it sounds good enough for you to use. So thank you very much for watching. If you're interested in checking our Rat out, they are still in production. You can pick one up in the link below. Don't forget to head over to our Patreon where you can become one of our Patreon members to support the channel, help us to put out as much good content as quickly as possible. If you do have any questions or suggestions, things you want to see, things you don't want to see, leave them in the comments below. We do appreciate that feedback. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again for watching.